The great hall of Arvendale shimmered with golden firelight. Nobles filled the marble floor, their laughter echoing beneath banners stitched with silver wolves. Every breath carried the scent of perfume, wine, and expectation. Tonight was not just a feast. It was a ceremony of destiny. Ilara stood at the center, her pulse drumming against her ribs. The silk gown her aunt had sewn clung to her in all the wrong places, or so the whispers said. "Too broad in the shoulders," one lady hissed behind her fan. "Too big to be delicate," murmured another. Ilara kept her eyes fixed on the dais, where Prince Rowan, her fated mate, stood waiting. He looked magnificent, tall with hair the color of burnished copper and a smile that had once made her believe in dreams. Yet tonight, that smile was cruel. His gaze slid over her, sharp and assessing, and Ilara felt something inside her fracture. When the high priest raised his staff and called for the union blessing, Rowan stepped forward. For a breath, hope flared in her chest. Then he spoke. "I cannot," he said, his voice carrying easily over the murmuring crowd. "I will not claim her." The hall went silent. Ilara froze, her breath stolen from her lungs. Rowan turned to the gathering, his tone dripping with disdain. "Look at her," he said. "A Luna should inspire grace and beauty. She is neither." Laughter rippled across the hall like poisoned silk. Faces she had known since childhood turned away or smirked behind jeweled goblets. Shame burned her skin, hot and merciless. She wanted to disappear, to dissolve into the stone beneath her feet. "Rowan, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't do this." He tilted his head, indifferent. "You were a mistake of the moon, Ilara. No wolf of mine would bear such weakness." Her heart pounded so violently she thought it might break free. The high priest lowered his staff, uncertain. Even the torches seemed to dim beneath the weight of humiliation. A noblewoman's laughter sliced through the silence. "Too big to be Luna. The prince deserves better than that." The words ignited the crowd. Laughter erupted again, louder, harsher. Ilara's vision blurred, the edges of the room dissolving into gold and shadow. Then a sound cut through everything. A low, resonant growl. It rolled through the hall like thunder before a storm. Every head turned. From the shadowed end of the hall, footsteps echoed. Slow, deliberate. The scent of dominance filled the air, ancient and untamed. The courtiers fell to their knees as the Alpha King entered. King Kale. Tall, broad-shouldered, his presence commanded silence. His eyes, amber, burning like molten gold, locked onto Ilara. He looked not at her shame, but through it, as though he saw something no one else dared to see. He approached Rowan, each step heavier than the last. "You reject your mate before the moon." His voice was low, dangerous. Rowan straightened, trying to recover his dignity. "My king, she is unworthy." Kale's growl deepened, primal and absolute. "Unworthy?" He stepped closer, until Rowan flinched. "That's my mate you're mocking." The hall erupted in gasps. The words hung heavy, filling every corner of the chamber. Ilara's knees nearly gave out. The king's mate? It couldn't be. Her heart stumbled over itself, confusion and disbelief warring inside her. Kyle turned to her, his expression unreadable, yet fierce. "You feel it, don't you?" he said quietly, his voice rough with certainty. "The bond." She opened her mouth, but no sound came. The heat that spread through her chest was undeniable, the magnetic pull between them, ancient and impossible to resist. The courtiers, still kneeling, whispered prayers under their breath. No one dared to laugh now. Kale faced the assembly. "Mock her again," he said, his tone calm and sharp as a blade, "and you mock your king." The silence that followed was absolute. Ilara's world had shattered, and yet somehow in that silence something new began to take shape. The great hall no longer seemed to close in on her. Instead, it opened, wide, dangerous and filled with possibility. As the torches flared brighter, the high priest lowered his gaze, murmuring reverently, "The moon chooses wisely." And for the first time, Ilara dared to lift her head. "Before we continue," If you wish to witness how fate reshapes a heart once broken, stay with us, subscribe, and let the story unfold. The murmurs inside the great hall swelled like a rising tide. No one dared to speak the truth aloud, yet every noble eye fixed on the king and the trembling woman at his side. Elara stood frozen, her heart still beating to the echo of Chaol's words. "That's my mate you're mocking." The sentence replayed in her head. A storm she could not silence, it made no sense. Mates were bound by fate, chosen by the moon, but never had a bond shifted once declared. And yet the pull between them burned undeniable, an invisible thread drawing her toward him even as she fought to breathe. Chaol turned toward her, his voice lowering, steady and deep. "You have nothing to fear here," he said. "Not anymore." His words struck her harder than Rowan's rejection. Her instinct screamed to bow, to show respect, but Chaol's gaze forbade it. He wanted her to stand, to meet him as his equal. The sheer weight of that expectation made her dizzy. "Your Majesty," Rowan began, his tone strained, "there must be some mistake." "She was promised to me." Chaol's eyes flicked to him, amber light glinting like fire. "You rejected her before the court," he said. "Your claim is void." "She's no queen," Rowan protested. "No noble blood, no training, no—" Chaol's growl rumbled low, silencing the words before they could finish. "You think worth is measured by blood?" He stepped closer, voice hardening. "You shamed the moon's choice before the eyes of your king. Pray she has more mercy than I do." A tense stillness followed. The courtiers knelt lower. Even the torches seemed to dim. Chaol turned back to Elara. "Come," he said softly, extending his hand. Her body trembled as she looked at his open palm. She had been mocked, humiliated, cast aside before these very eyes, and now this same court watched in awed silence as the Alpha King himself reached for her. Every instinct told her to refuse, to flee the unbearable attention, but something in his gaze, commanding yet patient, rooted her in place. Slowly she placed her hand in his. Heat surged through her skin, spreading like wildfire. The bond flared, undeniable, alive. Gasps rippled through the hall as silver light flickered briefly around their joined hands. The moon's acknowledgement. Chaol's voice carried easily, unshaken. "By right of the moon and blood of the crown, I claim my mate before the kingdom of Arvendale." A ripple of disbelief broke across the nobles. One voice whispered, "The king cannot choose a commoner." Another hissed, "It's witchcraft." Chaol's head turned slightly. "Speak again," he warned, "and the dungeons will have company." No one uttered another word. Elara's throat ached. "Why would you do this?" she whispered. "You don't even know me." Chaol's eyes softened. "I know the scent of your fear. I know the strength it takes to stand after being broken in front of wolves who would devour you. The moon knows your heart, Elara, and so do I." His words stole her breath. No man had ever spoken her name like that, as though it was sacred. Yet doubt lingered, gnawing at her edges. Was this protection or obligation? Rowan's voice cut through the stillness, bitter and sharp. "You'll regret this, Chaol. She'll never survive your court." Chaol didn't even glance at him. "Then may the court learn survival from her." He led Elara down the marble steps toward the exit. The nobles parted in silence, bowing as they passed. Every eye followed, filled with curiosity, envy, or fear. At the doors, Chaol paused. "You'll stay in the East Wing tonight," he told her. "The court is not kind to those who threaten its order. You'll need protection." "I don't want protection," she murmured. "I just want to understand why." Chaol studied her face for a long moment. "Because fate rarely asks for understanding," he said. "It demands courage." The doors closed behind them, shutting out the whispers, but not the storm that awaited beyond. The East Wing was colder than Elara expected. Moonlight spilled through narrow windows, stretching long pale lines across the stone floor. Somewhere in the distance, the echo of a door closing sounded like a heartbeat fading away. She sat at the edge of a vast bed draped in velvet, her hands clasped tight in her lap. Her pulse hadn't steadied since she left the great hall. She could still feel Chaol's presence beside her, the heat of his hand, the echo of that impossible bond. The Alpha King, Her mate. The thought was too heavy to hold. From the corridor came the murmur of servants and guards. None dared enter, but their whispers reached her clearly. "The king has gone mad," one said. "A common girl as Luna?" "The council won't stand for it," another voice replied. "She must have bewitched him. No other reason fits." Their words were knives, small but sharp. Ilara rose, moving toward the window. The night outside was vast and quiet. The forest beyond the castle walls shimmered beneath the moon, alive with unseen eyes. She pressed a hand against the glass and whispered, "What have you done to me, Moon?" The door creaked open. She turned sharply, heart racing. A woman entered, head bowed, carrying a tray of bread and broth. "Your Majesty," the servant murmured, trembling. Ilara blinked. "Don't call me that, I'm no queen." The woman hesitated, setting the tray on a small table. "You are the king's chosen." "That's more than enough." Before Ilara could respond, a deeper voice filled the doorway. "Leave us." The servant dropped into a curtsy and hurried out. Kyle stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His presence filled the room effortlessly, the air seeming to bend around his strength. He wore no crown now, only a black tunic and a quiet expression that revealed nothing. "You shouldn't be alone tonight," he said. "I've been alone most of my life," she replied. "I'll manage." He studied her for a moment. "You heard them, didn't you? The whispers." Ilara met his gaze. "They think I trapped you. And do you believe them?" His voice was calm, but something dangerous glimmered beneath it. She hesitated. "I don't know what to believe." Kyle took a slow step forward, his tone softening. "You think I'm a fool easily ensnared by beauty or spellcraft?" "I think," she said quietly, "that you're a king who just turned his entire court against him, for me. I don't understand why." He stopped a few feet away, the faint scent of cedar and smoke clinging to him. "Because truth doesn't bend to politics. The bond exists whether the court approves or not. When I saw you fall beneath their laughter, I felt the pull. It's the same pull I've resisted for years, until tonight." Ilara's chest tightened. "You've resisted the bond before?" Kyle nodded once. "I swore I'd never take a mate. Love makes kings weak, or so I believed. But when I heard that laughter, when I saw what they did to you, something inside me broke." Silence hung between them, thick and fragile. Ilara's throat ached. "You shouldn't have defended me. Now they'll despise you too." He gave a short, humorless smile. "They already did. Power breeds envy long before love adds fuel." Her eyes burned, not from tears but from the ache of being seen. Truly seen. "Then what happens now?" she asked. Kyle's expression hardened slightly. "Now we stand together, whether the court likes it or not. Tomorrow the council will demand answers, and I'll give them none they wish to hear." Ilara lowered her gaze, uncertain whether to feel protected or trapped. "And if they come for me?" His answer came without hesitation. "Then they come for their king as well." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, though the sky was clear. It echoed faintly through the stone walls, an omen, perhaps, of the storm quietly gathering within Arvendale. Morning light filtered through tall arched windows, gilding the chamber in shades of gold and ash. Ilara stood before a mirror framed in silver, watching the reflection of a woman she hardly recognized. Her gown, stitched in royal blue, fit too tightly around her shoulders. The fabric was heavy, stiff with embroidery that glittered under the sun. Every thread whispered of a world she didn't belong to. Lady Maris, the royal etiquette tutor, circled her like a hawk. "When you walk, keep your chin high," she instructed, tapping Ilara's wrist with a polished cane. "A Luna must glide, not stumble, shoulders back, eyes down when addressing nobles of the High Council." Ilara tried to obey, though each correction stung. "I'm not a noble," she murmured. "No," Maris said sharply, "but you must become one before the council meets again. The king's patience will not shield you from their judgment." Ilara's pulse faltered. "They already despise me." "Then make them fear disappointing you," Maris replied, turning toward the door. "Royalty is not about love. It's survival." When the door closed, Silence pressed heavy against her ears. Ilara exhaled shakily. She'd faced mockery before, but never with the weight of a crown looming above her. A knock sounded, firm, deliberate. Kyle entered, his presence as steady as the morning itself. "You've been awake since dawn," he said, his eyes scanning her reflection in the mirror. "You should rest." "I couldn't," she replied. "The lessons start early." Kyle's expression softened briefly, before hardening again. "They push too much too soon." "I need to learn," Ilara said quietly. "I won't embarrass you." Kyle's gaze met hers through the mirror. "You already carry yourself better than half the court. Their cruelty does not define you." "But it defines how they see me," she answered. "And that's what matters in a kingdom, isn't it?" He moved closer, his voice low. "What matters is that you see yourself clearly. They bend before the wind. You are the storm that makes them bow." For a moment, warmth flickered through her chest, an unfamiliar comfort that both steadied and frightened her. A sharp knock interrupted them. General Corvin entered, bowing slightly. His grey hair and scarred hands spoke of decades of loyalty. "Your Majesty," he said, addressing Kale. "The Council demands audience by sunset. They question your bond and your judgment." Kyle's jaw tightened. "Of course they do." Corvin's gaze flicked toward Ilara, hesitant. "Forgive my bluntness, my king, but the nobles believe the bond weakens the crown. They whisper that the moon has cursed Arvendale." Ilara's stomach twisted. "Because of me." Kyle turned sharply. "Because they mistake obedience for strength." His tone cut like steel. "You are not their curse, Ilara. You're their reminder that fate answers to no man." Corvin bowed again. "Then you'll face them today?" "I'll face them," Kyle said, "and they'll learn the price of their arrogance." When the general left, Ilara sank into the nearest chair. Her hands trembled slightly. "You can't protect me forever," she said. "Sooner or later they'll demand proof that I belong here." Kyle looked down at her, a faint shadow crossing his face. "Then give it to them." She blinked, uncertain. "How?" "By standing beside me," he said simply. "Not as a servant, not as a frightened girl. As the Luna the moon chose." His certainty struck her harder than any insult the court had thrown. It left no space for doubt, only the echo of a future she hadn't asked for but could no longer deny. As Kyle turned to leave, she called softly, "And if I fail?" He paused at the door, his voice low but firm. "Then you'll rise again. Queens do not fail. They learn." When he was gone, Ilara looked back at her reflection. The woman in the mirror no longer seemed small. The gown still felt heavy, but now it resembled armor. The night of the royal ball arrived wrapped in silver and tension. Music drifted from the great hall, soft at first, then swelling with the rhythm of hundreds of murmuring voices. Ilara stood outside the carved oak doors, her hands trembling against the folds of her gown. She could hear laughter within, polished, cruel, the same laughter that had once broken her in this very place. Her reflection in the polished steel of a guard's armor startled her. The woman who stared back was not the village girl she remembered. The gown she wore shimmered like moonlight caught in fabric, every stitch crafted from defiance and survival. It had belonged to her mother, a relic of love and memory. "You don't have to do this," a voice whispered behind her. It was Mara, one of the palace attendants who had quietly become her only friend. "They're waiting to see you fail," Mara warned. "The nobles have been whispering all day." "I know," Ilara said. "That's why I have to walk in there." She took a steadying breath. When the doors opened, every conversation in the great hall died at once. The nobles turned, their jeweled masks of civility cracking with disbelief. The same men and women who had once mocked her now watched in silence as she crossed the threshold. Ilara felt their stares like arrows against her skin. She kept her head high, though her heart pounded so fiercely it threatened to betray her calm. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "The peasant Luna," someone hissed. "She dares wear the crown's color." Another voice, softer yet venomous, followed. "She'll embarrass the king before the night ends." At the far end of the hall, Kyle stood beside the council dais. His presence commanded the room effortlessly, but when his gaze found hers, the air shifted. Pride flickered in his expression, quiet, unspoken, but powerful enough to steady her steps. "Ilara of Arvindale," the herald announced, voice ringing out above the murmurs, "Luna and consort of His Majesty, King Cale." Every noble bowed by instinct, though most did so with gritted teeth. Ilara caught sight of Lady Serene, a duchess known for her cruelty, forcing a tight smile. "Let's see how long she lasts," the woman muttered to her companion. Ilara walked past them without a word, each step a declaration that she would no longer shrink beneath their judgment. Cale descended the dais, stopping before her. "You came," he said quietly, his tone threaded with approval. "I wasn't sure I belonged here," she admitted. He offered his hand, his eyes gleaming with warmth that cut through the chill of the room. "Then let them see why you do." She hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. The music resumed, softer now, as Kyle led her to the center of the marble floor. The nobles watched, a sea of expectation and envy. As they began to dance, the world narrowed to the sound of strings and the steady rhythm of Cale's heart beneath his hand. Every movement drew her closer. Every breath she took seemed to echo in his. "You've silenced them," he murmured. "For now," she whispered. "But what happens when they remember who I was?" Kyle's hand tightened around hers. "Then remind them who you are." The tempo rose. The murmurs faded. For the first time since the rejection that had humiliated her before the kingdom, Ilara felt free, not because the court accepted her, but because she no longer needed their acceptance. When the music ended, the hall stood silent again. Kyle turned to the crowd, his voice carrying effortlessly. "My Luna fears no shadow," he said. "And neither should you." The nobles bowed low, though some with clenched jaws. Ilara felt the weight of every eye upon her, but she stood unflinching, the faint light of the moon spilling through the high windows to rest upon her shoulders, its mark quiet and absolute. By dawn, the echo of last night's whispers still clung to the marble halls. The royal court had bowed, but their submission had tasted like venom. Ilara could feel it. Their resentment lingered behind every smile, coiled and waiting. Kyle had warned her that silence in Arvindale was never peace. It was preparation. When the messenger arrived, his expression was grave. "A challenge has been issued," he announced. "Alpha Darren of the Northern Peaks questions your Luna's worth." Kyle's hands tightened around the edge of the council table. "On what grounds?" "The bond, Your Majesty. He claims the crown has been weakened by sentiment." Ilara's breath caught. "He wants to test me." Kyle looked at her, his expression unreadable. "No, he wants to humiliate you before the Pax." "The challenge is not to prove your loyalty to me. It's to prove my loyalty to you." The council chamber erupted in murmurs. General Corvin leaned forward. "Reject the challenge, my king. A Luna of noble blood might face it and survive, but—" "But she will," Kyle interrupted, his tone sharp as steel. "The moon chose her. She will answer its call." All eyes turned to Ilara. The weight of their expectations pressed against her ribs, but beneath it something fierce stirred. "Then I'll face him," she said. "Not for them, for myself." Later that morning, the court gathered in the courtyard, a half-circle of nobles and warriors, watching as the air thickened with anticipation. The challenge was sacred, an ancient ritual known as the Trial of Loyalty. No swords. No bloodshed, only endurance, spirit, and truth. Darren stood at the center, tall and broad, his wolf aura radiating dominance. "Your Majesty," he said with mock respect. "If she is truly the moon's chosen, let her prove it." Ilara met his gaze without flinching. "And if I do?" "Then the North will kneel," he said, his smirk widening. "But fail, and I will demand the crown reconsider its Luna." Kyle's jaw tensed, but he said nothing. This was her fight now. The ritual began. The priest marked a circle in ash and salt, murmuring words older than the kingdom itself. "Step forward," he commanded. Ilara obeyed, the world narrowing to the heartbeat in her ears. The test of loyalty was threefold: courage before fear, truth before judgment, and endurance before pain. The first trial struck without warning. Flames rose around her, phantom fire created by ancient magic. She could feel its heat licking at her skin, the illusion whispering of failure, of the night she was rejected. "You'll never be enough," the echoes sneered. Rowan's voice, taunting, cruel, wrapped around her like smoke. Ilara closed her eyes and forced herself to breathe. That was the past. I am not her anymore. When she opened them again, the flames had dimmed. The second trial came as visions, faces of the court, sneering, mocking, their laughter turning into snarls. Darren's voice joined them. "A peasant cannot lead wolves." Ilara's throat tightened. "Her Luna is not made by birth," she said aloud. "She is forged by the trials she survives." The illusions shattered like glass, scattering into the wind. The third trial was silence, the kind that suffocates. Her heart slowed, her strength draining, until she could barely stand. Her knees buckled. Somewhere beyond the circle, Kale's voice reached her. "Ilara." Just her name, but it grounded her. She rose trembling and looked toward the priest. "It's done," she whispered. The ash circle flared silver, sealing the ritual. The priest nodded solemnly. "She stands unbroken." The courtyard erupted in murmurs of disbelief. Darren's smirk had vanished, replaced by something colder, respect mixed with fear. Kyle stepped forward, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "The moon has spoken. My Luna stands not beneath me but beside me." Ilara met his gaze, exhaustion burning behind her eyes, but beneath it, pride glowed steady and sure. The forest was silent when Ilara entered, its ancient trees rising like sentinels beneath a pale, cold moon. Every trial left her bruised in body and soul, but this was different. The final stage of the trial of loyalty demanded solitude. No spectators, no council, not even Kale. Only her, the forest, and the whisper of the moon above. The air was sharp with frost, her breath forming clouds that vanished too quickly. Somewhere deep in the woods, the path split into darkness. The priest's words echoed in her mind. "In the forest of echoes, one does not face enemies, one faces the truth." Ilara walked. Each step crunched against frozen leaves, and the silence pressed harder with every heartbeat. She could feel it, the weight of unseen eyes, the pulse of magic buried in the soil. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, restless and wary. Then came the first whisper, soft, almost tender. "You're not meant for this world." Ilara froze. The voice was her mother's, gentle yet hollow, carried on the wind. "You were always too much," it continued. "Too loud, too big, too wild." Her throat closed. She wanted to run, but she forced herself to stay still. "You're not real," she said aloud. A shadow flickered between the trees. "Real enough to remind you," the voice answered. "Even now you think you can wear a crown built for someone smaller." The forest pulsed with the sound of laughter. Rowan's laugh, cruel and mocking. "The king chose you out of pity," he jeered. "A broken Luna for a broken throne." Ilara's knees weakened, her breath catching. She had heard those words before, once whispered behind her back, now spoken by the ghosts of her own fear. "Stop it," she whispered. But the echoes multiplied, hundreds of them, overlapping, nobles, servants, even her younger self. "You're not enough. You'll never be enough." Ilara dropped to her knees, clutching the frozen earth. For a moment she almost believed them. The weight of doubt pressed against her ribs until she could barely breathe. Then another voice rose above the rest, low, commanding, unyielding. Kyle's voice. "You are the storm that makes them bow." The forest stilled. The whispers faltered. Ilara opened her eyes, her pulse thundering. She remembered the way Kyle had looked at her, not as a burden, but as an equal. He had seen her when no one else dared. "I'm not too much," she said, her voice shaking but growing stronger. "And I am not small enough to fit inside their comfort." The shadows hissed, retreating into the trees. The air trembled with resistance, the forest itself unwilling to let go. "You cannot silence what you fear," one last voice whispered, desperate now. Ilara rose to her feet. Then I will stop fearing it. A sudden light erupted from within her, soft and silver like moonlight reflected on water. It pulsed once, twice before spreading outward. The trees swayed, the ground hummed, and the voices shattered into nothingness. The forest went still. Only her heartbeat remained. She stood alone, her chest heaving, her eyes wet but fierce. The moon hung above her, full and watching, its glow wrapping around her like a vow. For the first time she didn't bow to it. She met its gaze. When the priest's voice called from afar, carried by wind and ritual, it sounded almost reverent. The Luna has faced herself and endured. Ilara turned toward the distant light of the castle. The forest behind her was quiet now, but she knew its silence meant respect, not defeat. The trial of loyalty had not been about proving her worth to Kael or the council. It had been about remembering that she'd always had it, and as she stepped beyond the tree line, her wolf stirred again, not in fear this time, but in pride. The night after the trial was clear, the sky awash with silver light. Ilara stood on the balcony of her chamber, her skin still tingling with the remnants of the forest's magic. The kingdom slept below her, unaware that something within her had changed forever. The fear that had once clung to her had burned away, leaving something steadier, something like peace. She closed her eyes and breathed in the scent of pine and cold wind. For the first time since entering the palace, she didn't feel like an intruder. She felt present. The bond between her and Kael pulsed quietly beneath her skin, warm and alive, as though the moon itself had stitched it there. Footsteps echoed behind her. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. "You should be resting," Kael said. His voice, low and rough, carried that mix of command and gentleness that always seemed to steady her pulse. Ilara smiled faintly. "I could say the same to you." He stepped beside her, his presence grounding yet unyielding. "Word of your victory has already reached the northern packs," he said. "Darren has withdrawn his challenge." "That quickly?" she asked. Kael's lips curved. "Wolves fear what they can't control. You've proven yourself beyond their reach." Her hand tightened on the stone railing. "I didn't do it for them." He turned to face her fully. "I know." Silence stretched between them, not awkward, but filled with the quiet understanding of two souls who had walked through fire and emerged changed. The moonlight brushed over Kael's face, softening the edges usually carved in steel. "When I first met you," he said, "I thought the bond was a punishment. The moon forcing me to feel what I'd spent years avoiding. But tonight, when I watched you stand in that circle, I realized it wasn't punishment at all." Ilara's voice was barely above a whisper. "Then what was it?" "Redemption." The word hung between them, heavy and fragile. She looked away, the weight of it pressing against her ribs. "I don't know if I can be what this kingdom needs," she admitted. "I'm still learning who I am." Kael's hand found hers. "The kingdom doesn't need perfection. It needs truth. You are that." His touch was steady, but there was something deeper beneath it, an energy that hummed through her veins, old as the moon itself. The bond flared, answering some invisible call. Her heart stuttered as a faint silver glow bloomed where their hands met. Ilara gasped. "What is that?" Kael's gaze softened. "The crescent bond. It awakens when two souls finally accept what the moon has already decreed." The glow pulsed, spreading from her hand to her chest, wrapping around her like light woven into her very being. It wasn't fire or pain. It was warmth, ancient and pure. For the first time she didn't resist it. "I feel it," she breathed. "Every heartbeat. It's yours." "And mine," he said. "But it's more than that. It's strength shared. When one falters, the other endures." The glow faded, leaving behind only the echo of its warmth. She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "What happens now?" Kael hesitated, his expression unreadable. "Now the court will test us again, they always do. But let them come." Ilara smiled faintly, the weight of fear replaced by quiet resolve. "Then we'll stand together." Kael nodded once, his eyes gleaming beneath the moonlight. "Together," As the night deepened, neither spoke again. Words were no longer needed. The silence between them was no longer emptiness. It was a promise, sealed not by ceremony or decree, but by the steady rhythm of two hearts beating as one beneath the crescent moon. And somewhere, far beyond the palace walls, the wolves of Arvindale lifted their voices in unison, a song of allegiance echoing through the night. The council chamber was cloaked in silence when Ilara entered, her steps echoing across the marble floor. The scent of cold stone and old parchment filled the air. Kyle stood at the far end, speaking quietly with General Corvin, their expressions grim. One look at them told her that peace was slipping through their fingers. "The northern packs have withdrawn their loyalty," Corvin said. "They claim the king has been compromised by his Luna." Kale's voice was low and steady. "They seek to provoke war, not counsel." Ilara's stomach tightened. "They blame me." Corvin's gaze softened but did not waver. "They fear what they cannot control, my lady. And a Luna who defies their order terrifies them." Kyle dismissed the general with a nod. When they were alone, he turned toward her, eyes dark with worry. "I should have known this would happen." "You warned me," she admitted. "You told me they would never accept me." "I told you they would try to destroy you," Kyle said, his tone sharpening. "There's a difference." Ilara crossed her arms, holding herself steady. "Then what do we do?" He hesitated, something flickering behind his calm mask. "There's more. A message came at dawn. Rowan has returned." Her breath caught. "Rowan?" "He's been seen at Darren's fortress. He's rallying the northern nobles, claiming your bond with me is false. He says you used witchcraft to seduce the crown." Ilara's pulse quickened. "That's a lie." Kyle stepped closer, his voice quiet but fierce. "Of course it is, but lies are louder than truth when whispered into fear." She looked away, struggling to breathe. The memory of Rowan's laughter during her rejection resurfaced like poison. "He won't stop until I'm ruined." Kyle's hand brushed her arm, his touch grounding her. "He won't ruin you, Ilara." "Not while I live." But his reassurance did little to quiet the unease curling in her chest. "If he convinces the nobles to stand against you, the council will demand your abdication." Kale met her eyes, unflinching. "Then they will learn what it means to defy their king." Later that night, Ilara couldn't sleep. The palace had grown too quiet, the kind of silence that hides danger. She wandered the corridors, following the faint hum of conversation. Near the council hall, a door was left slightly ajar. She shouldn't have stopped, but she did. Inside, voices hissed low and urgent. "The king has lost his reason," one councillor said. "He refuses our counsel, refuses to cast her aside." Another voice, calm, familiar, venomous, answered, "He won't refuse much longer. Once the north rises, he'll have no choice." Ilara's pulse hammered. She leaned closer, heart in her throat. "Rowan promised his support," the first man said. "The rebellion begins within days, but the Luna cannot live to see it." Her breath caught. "You mean to kill her?" "The people need a tragedy to unite them. A fallen Luna will turn them against the king. When she's gone, Kale will crumble." Ilara stumbled back, her vision spinning. The walls seemed to close around her. For a moment she couldn't breathe. The council, his own advisors, were conspiring with Rowan. She fled down the corridor, the echo of their words chasing her like wolves through the dark. When she reached her chamber, she locked the door and pressed her back against it, shaking. She had to tell Kale, but if she did, it would mean accusing the very men who had sworn fealty to him since his coronation. It would divide the kingdom before Rowan's forces even arrived. Her reflection in the window caught her eye. The woman staring back looked nothing like the frightened girl who had once stood humiliated before the court. "You survived their laughter," she whispered to herself. "You'll survive their betrayal." Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon. The storm she had feared for so long was finally coming, and this time she would not run. The night of the harvest feast began with uneasy grandeur. The great hall glimmered beneath hundreds of candles, but the air was thick with something colder than fear, expectation. Ilara stood beside Kyle on the dais, dressed in the deep crimson of the crown, every inch of her posture rehearsed and steady. Yet her pulse told another story. She hadn't slept since overhearing the council's plot. Kyle's voice rose above the music, steady and regal. "Tonight we celebrate peace," he said, though his tone held the weight of irony. A peace hard won and harder to keep. The nobles applauded, but Ilara saw their glances, quick, wary, complicit. Rowan was not among them, but his presence could be felt in every shadow. The Northern Alliance was moving faster than Kyle suspected. A servant passed by with a tray of wine. Ilara's instincts prickled. She caught the faintest scent. Bitter. Wrong. Her eyes followed the servant to the high table. Without thinking, she reached out, her voice sharp. "Don't drink that." Kyle paused mid-motion, his eyes flicking toward her. Silence rippled through the hall. "Ilara?" he asked softly. She stepped forward, her heart pounding. "It's poisoned," she said, louder now. Gasps erupted. The servant froze, terror in his eyes. Kyle seized the goblet, raising it to his nose. The sharp tang of nightshade confirmed her fear. He turned to the guards. "Seize him." But before they could act, a deafening crash split the air. One of the tall windows shattered inward, and a flaming arrow streaked across the hall. The crowd screamed as chaos erupted. Tables overturned, wine spilled like blood across marble. Kyle pulled Ilara close, his voice a growl of command. "Stay behind me." More arrows rained down. Guards rushed to form a shield wall, dragging nobles to safety. Ilara's mind raced. This wasn't random. It was the coup she'd overheard, unleashed sooner than she had feared. Kyle's generals shouted orders, but the sound of steel clashing with steel drowned everything. Smoke thickened, filling the hall with choking heat. A banner caught fire, its golden wolf insignia devoured by flame. Ilara's vision blurred. She caught sight of movement near the side doors, a figure in black armor slipping through the chaos. Her heart froze. Rowan. Without thinking, she broke free from Kyle's grasp. He shouted her name, but she was already moving. The crowd swirled around her, screams blending with the crackle of fire. "Rowan!" she called out, her voice raw. "Stop this!" He turned, his expression twisted with rage and triumph. "You should have stayed forgotten," he spat. "You were never meant to stand beside a king." "You're killing innocent people," she cried. "Innocence is weakness," Rowan said. "And Kale's weakness is you." A blade flashed in his hand, aimed not at her but past her, toward Kale across the hall. Ilara didn't think. She moved. The world slowed to a single heartbeat. Pain seared through her side as the dagger struck. The sound of her gasp cut through the roar of the flames. Kyle's growl shattered the air. He was beside her in an instant, catching her as she fell. "Ilara, I'm fine," she lied, blood warm beneath her fingers. "Stop him." Kyle looked up, but Rowan was gone, swallowed by the chaos. Guards surged after him, but the coup was already unraveling. The conspirators had failed to strike the king, but they had drawn blood from his heart. Ilara's vision dimmed, but she forced her gaze upward. Kale's face hovered above her, fierce and afraid. "You protected me," he said, voice breaking. "You would have done the same," she whispered. Flames roared around them, consuming the banners, the walls, the lies. Kyle lifted her in his arms, his voice a vow carved in fire. "No one will ever touch you again." The great hall burned behind them, as the king carried his wounded Luna through the smoke. The castle lay in ruins of silence after the fire. Smoke still clung to the air, heavy with ash and sorrow. Outside, the kingdom waited for word of its king and Luna, whispering tales of rebellion and death. But within the king's chambers, life flickered faintly, fragile, stubborn, and unyielding. Ilara lay pale against the sheets, her breath shallow but steady. The dagger's wound had been deep, yet not mortal. Still, it had taken nearly all of Kale's strength to keep her alive through the night. He had not left her side once. He sat now beside her bed, head bowed, eyes bloodshot from exhaustion. The firelight danced across his hands, still stained faintly with her blood. When Ilara stirred, he lifted his gaze immediately. "Ilara," he said, the single word breaking with relief. Her voice was a whisper. "Why you didn't sleep?" "I couldn't." She tried to smile, but pain flickered through her face. "You look worse than I do." He almost smiled in return, but his heart was too heavy for it to last. "You saved my life." "You would have done the same," she said softly, echoing her words from the night before. Kyle reached for her hand, careful not to startle her. "You should have run when the attack began." "And leave you," she whispered. "You forget. I'm stubborn." His thumb brushed her wrist, tracing the faint glow beneath her skin where the bond had once flared. "The crescent bond reacted when you were struck," he said quietly. "I felt it, the pain, the fear. It nearly destroyed me." Her eyes opened fully, their light dim but resolute. "It's not meant to destroy," she murmured. "It's meant to remind us what we fight for." Kyle's throat tightened. "You speak like a queen." "I'm learning from one," she replied faintly. Then, after a pause, "The council, they planned this, didn't they?" He nodded, anger hardening his features. "They betrayed their oaths. Some escaped in the chaos, others were captured." "But Rowan, he vanished into the night." Her fingers curled around his. "Then he's not finished." "No," Kyle said, his tone like stone. "And neither am I." For a moment, silence fell between them. Beyond the window, the first snow of winter began to fall, blanketing the world in pale serenity that mocked the storm within the castle walls. "I keep thinking about the fire," Ilara said, her voice trembling. "About the people who died because of me." Kyle's jaw tightened. "Because of them," he corrected. "Because of men who feared change more than they loved peace. I don't want their deaths to mean nothing." "They won't," Kyle said. "When you walk again, you'll stand before the court and they'll see what real strength looks like." She looked up at him, her eyes glistening. "I'm not sure I can." "Yes, you can," he said, leaning closer. "The moon doesn't make mistakes, Ilara. It chose you for a reason." A long pause passed before she whispered, "And what if the moon chose wrong?" Kyle's answer came without hesitation. "Then I'll defy it." The words hung heavy in the air, a vow more sacred than any oath. Ilara's breath caught, not from pain, but from the weight of what he meant. The Alpha King, sworn to the moon's will, would defy destiny itself if it meant keeping her alive. He lifted her hand to his lips. "Rest now." "I'll be here when you wake." Her eyes fluttered shut, but before sleep took her, she whispered, "You already are." Kale remained long after her breathing steadied, staring into the fire until dawn broke across the sky. Outside, the wolves of Arvendale howled, not in mourning but in promise. Their Luna still lived, and through her the kingdom would rise again. Winter deepened over Arvendale, cloaking the kingdom in white silence. Weeks had passed since the attack, yet the scars it left, both visible and unseen, still lingered. Ilara had healed enough to walk again, though each step carried the weight of memory. The people whispered her name now not with ridicule but reverence, the Luna who had bled for her king, the woman who defied death. But inside something had changed. Beneath her skin a restless energy stirred, a pulse that was not entirely her own. It woke her at night, thrumming through her veins like a song half-remembered. The wolf within her had begun to awaken. Kyle noticed it before she did. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked one morning, his tone gentle yet wary. Ilara hesitated. "It feels like fire," she admitted. "Like it's waiting for me to lose control." "It's not waiting," he said. "It's answering." They stood in the courtyard where snowflakes melted against the stones. Kyle's gaze was steady, but there was concern behind it. "Your wolf is powerful. It's been dormant for too long. The bond we share has accelerated the awakening," she frowned. "You mean because of the crescent bond?" "Yes," Kyle said quietly. "When you saved me, when you took that blade, it broke something open inside you. The moon doesn't grant that kind of strength without consequence." Ilara looked down at her hands. "I can feel it pushing at me. Sometimes it's anger, sometimes fear. I don't know how to control it." Kyle stepped closer. "Then don't fight it. The wolf is not your enemy. It's the truth you've spent your life denying." His words echoed in her mind long after he left. That night, sleep eluded her. The wind howled outside, and the sound resonated deep in her chest until she could no longer tell if it was the storm or her own heartbeat calling. She rose and walked to the terrace, the cold biting into her skin. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the frozen glass, eyes brighter, pupils sharp, the faintest trace of silver at the edges. "I'm not afraid," she whispered, though her voice trembled. But the truth was that she was. For years, she had been mocked for her strength, her size, her difference. Now that very difference had become something vast and untamed inside her, a force she didn't yet understand. The moon broke through the clouds then, a beam of pale light falling over her. The pull was immediate, fierce, undeniable. Her pulse matched the rhythm of the wind. Her breath came shallow. The world tilted. The first growl tore from her throat before she even realized it. The sound was raw, primal, filled with the echo of something ancient. Pain lanced through her body and she fell to her knees, clutching her chest. "Breathe," a voice whispered behind her. Kyle stood at the threshold, his eyes glowing faintly gold. He had felt her awakening through the bond. "Let it come," he said. "Don't run from it." "I can't," she gasped. "It's too much." "Yes, you can," he said firmly. "You've already survived worse." Her bones ached, shifting, burning, and then release. A surge of light and sound, and when she looked down, her hands were gone, replaced by silver-grey fur glinting under the moon. For the first time, she saw through her wolf's eyes, clearer, sharper, filled with power. She could feel everything: the wind, the heartbeat of the earth, the pull of Kyle's presence like gravity itself. Kyle's own wolf bowed its head in silent reverence. "You were never meant to be tamed," he said softly. Ilara's wolf lifted its gaze to the sky and howled, not in pain but in freedom. The sound carried over the castle, through the valley, across the frozen fields of Arvindale. And the people who heard it that night knew the truth at last. Their Luna was no longer just the king's mate. She was the heart of the pack. Dawn came quietly, painted in muted gold across the kingdom that had nearly fallen apart. The rebellion was crushed, the fires extinguished, but the ashes of betrayal still clung to the palace walls. Every corridor whispered the same question: what justice would the king deliver now? Ilara stood beside Kale in the throne room, her silver eyes calm but unwavering. She had spent days mastering her control, her wolf now a part of her, rather than a storm beneath her skin. The council had been summoned, their faces pale and hollow. Shackled among them stood Rowan and the remaining conspirators, their arrogance gone, replaced by the dread of judgment. Kyle's voice filled the chamber, steady as stone. "You sought to divide this kingdom. You conspired against the crown and the bond the moon itself sanctified. For this you will face the justice of Arvindale." Rowan lifted his head, his voice sharp, though weak. "How you call this justice? You claim divinity as your right, Kyle, but you are no better than the tyrants before you. You let her," he spat the word like venom, "twist you into a fool." Ilara met his glare, unflinching. "You speak of twisting when it was your deceit that poisoned this court." "You bewitched him," Rowan shouted. "You made him forget his people, his duty, his blood." Kyle's jaw clenched, but Ilara raised a hand, her voice calm and precise. "Do you truly believe that? That a woman's strength can only exist through manipulation?" Rowan sneered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "You don't belong on that throne." "Neither did you," she said softly. "You had every chance to lead with honor, Rowan. But you chose envy over loyalty, fear over truth. You weren't rejected because of what I am, you were rejected because of what you became." The chamber fell silent. Even the guards stilled. Kale turned his gaze toward the councillors who had stood beside Rowan. "Do any of you deny your treachery?" One man stepped forward, trembling. "We were afraid, my king. The bond between you and her, it frightened us. The moon chose outside the bloodlines. We thought it was a curse." Kyle rose from his throne, his presence commanding yet weary. "You mistook the blessing of the moon for a threat. You chose fear when you should have chosen faith." Ilara spoke then, her tone gentle but resonant. "Fear blinds even the wise. But if we answer it with vengeance, we become no better than those who struck us." Kale's eyes softened slightly. "You would show them mercy?" I would show them understanding, she said. Let the people see what true strength looks like, not in cruelty, but in restraint. The councillors exchanged stunned glances. Rowan laughed bitterly. Mercy? You would spare traitors? Yes, Ilara said, because I refuse to let hate define this kingdom. You wanted to see me broken, Rowan. You failed. Not because of power or magic, but because I will not become the monster you believed I was. Kyle studied her for a long moment before nodding once. So it shall be. His gaze swept the chamber. Those who conspired will face exile beyond the northern borders. Their lands will be returned to the crown, their titles stripped, but their lives spared. The murmurs that followed were filled with disbelief. Even Rowan's defiance faltered. He turned his eyes toward Ilara, something like regret flickering there, brief and uncertain. Kael's voice carried the weight of finality. Let it be known, the Lunar of Arvendale does not rule through fear, but through the will of the moon. The guards led the prisoners away. When the doors closed, Kael looked at Ilara. You could have demanded their deaths. She shook her head. I've seen enough blood to last a lifetime. Outside, the first light of day touched the spires of the castle, pure and quiet. The kingdom, wounded but alive, began to breathe again, and for the first time since the night of her rejection, Ilara felt something close to peace. Spring returned to Arvendale like a promise fulfilled. The ice melted from the rivers, and the first blooms of the season lined the castle paths in pale gold and violet. For weeks the kingdom had whispered of the ceremony to come, the crowning of a Lunar not born of nobility, but chosen by fate itself. Ilara stood before the mirror in the royal chambers, her gown the color of starlight, simple yet radiant. Every movement carried the weight of her journey, from the girl mocked for her strength to the woman who now stood at the threshold of history. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the silver band upon her wrist, the one Kael had given her when they first forged their bond. Mara, her attendant and friend, smiled softly from behind. You don't look nervous, she said, though her tone held teasing warmth. I'm terrified, Ilara admitted. I just learned to hide it better. The court will see a queen, Mara said. Not fear. Ilara nodded, though inside her heart raced. This wasn't about crowns or power, it was about legacy. What she built today would shape the kingdom long after her name faded into legend. The sound of footsteps drew her gaze to the door. Kyle entered, dressed in black and gold, his presence commanding yet softened by the rare smile he saved only for her. They're waiting, he said quietly. She took a steady breath. So are we. He approached her, his gaze lingering on her face. You once told me you didn't belong in this world, he said. I told you then you were wrong. Now they'll see why. His words steadied her. And if they don't? Then I'll remind them, he said, offering his hand. The great doors opened, and sunlight poured through the stained glass, painting the throne room in hues of crimson and gold. Nobles, warriors, and pack leaders from every corner of the realm filled the hall. The air buzzed with awe, tension, and something close to reverence. Ilara walked beside Kael toward the dais. The crowd bowed, a sound like a wave breaking across stone. At the steps, Kael turned to face her, his voice carrying through the chamber. By decree of the moon and by the will of the crown, he said, I name Ilara of Arvendale not only as my mate, but as Lunar Queen of this realm. She stands as equal sovereign, bound to me by blood, by bond, and by destiny. The priest stepped forward, holding a circlet wrought of silver and moonstone. Ilara, daughter of no house, bearer of the crescent bond, do you accept the weight of this crown? Her voice was steady. I do. Do you swear to lead with mercy when others demand vengeance, and with strength when others falter? I swear it. The priest lowered the crown onto her head. For a heartbeat the hall was silent. Then light erupted, not from the torches, but from the moon itself. A single beam broke through the ceiling's high window, bathing her in silver. The symbol of the crescent bond shimmered faintly across her skin. Gasps filled the chamber. Even the skeptics bowed lower, their resistance melting into awe. Kyle stepped beside her, his hand finding hers. "The kingdom stands united," he declared, "and its queen stands unbroken." Applause swelled like thunder, echoing through the vaulted ceiling. But amid the noise, Ilara heard only the steady rhythm of Kale's heartbeat and the quiet strength that had carried her here. When the hall quieted, she spoke, her voice calm yet commanding. "For too long this kingdom has judged worth by blood and birth. That ends today. From this moment, Arvindale stands for more than power. It stands for the courage to change." Her words rippled through the crowd, planting something new in their hearts. Belief. Kyle looked at her with pride. The moon herself could not have spoken truer. Ilara met his gaze, her fear finally gone. "Then let the moon bear witness. The Lunar Queen has risen." And in that moment, the kingdom of Arvindale bowed not out of duty but out of devotion. The kingdom of Arvindale awoke beneath a sky of silver light. The full moon hung high above the castle, luminous and watchful, its glow reflected on the marble towers that now bore new banners, woven with the crest of both wolf and crown. Months had passed since the coronation, and peace had finally taken root like spring after a long and bitter winter. Ilara walked through the royal gardens, where night-blooming flowers opened beneath the moonlight. The air was cool, fragrant with lavender and rain. Each step she took left a faint shimmer on the dew-covered path, her connection to the moon's power now effortless, natural. She no longer felt the weight of her title as a burden. It had become a part of her, as inseparable as the beat of her heart. Kyle found her there, his presence still and steady as always. "You should be resting," he said, his voice softened by the calm of the night. She smiled faintly. "You sound like you've forgotten who's queen." "I could never forget," he replied. "But even queens need peace." "I'm not restless," she said, "just listening." He tilted his head, watching her. "To what?" She lifted her gaze to the moon. "To her." "The moon doesn't speak with words, Kale. She hums. And tonight she sounds content." Kyle stepped closer, his eyes tracing her profile. The same awe he had felt from the first moment he saw her still present, though tempered now by quiet familiarity. "Then perhaps she sings for you." Ilara's smile deepened. "No, Kale. She sings for us. For the kingdom we rebuilt from ashes." They stood together in silence for a long while, the only sound the rustle of the wind through the trees. The peace between them was profound, born not from stillness, but from understanding. Kyle finally spoke. "When I first became king, I thought strength meant ruling alone, that if I closed my heart, I could never be broken." "And now?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Now I know that strength means standing beside someone who refuses to let you fall." Ilara's throat tightened. "And if we fall?" "Then we rise," he said simply, "as we always have." The bond between them stirred, warm and steady, glowing faintly beneath their skin. It wasn't the fierce pull of their first connection, but something gentler, like the rhythm of the tide against the shore. Far beyond the walls, the sound of distant howls rose, one voice joined by another, and another still. It spread across the kingdom like a hymn. The packs were singing, the ancient song of the moon, a call of unity that hadn't been heard in generations. Ilara closed her eyes, listening. "They're not howling for power," she said softly. "They're howling for hope." Kale looked toward the horizon, where the mountains stood outlined in moonlight. "For centuries, wolves fought to be heard. You gave them a voice." "We gave them one," she corrected. "Together." He nodded. "Together." The howls grew louder, filling the night until it seemed the very stars trembled. Ilara felt it deep in her chest, the pulse of the kingdom, the strength of its people, the harmony of unity reborn. She turned to Kyle. "Do you ever wonder what the moon sees when she looks at us?" "Perhaps," he said, "she sees two souls who refuse to surrender." "Or two fools who defied destiny," she teased gently. "Maybe both," he said, smiling. The laughter between them was quiet, but real, the sound of a bond that had survived rejection, war, and doubt. Ilara looked once more at the glowing sky, her voice a whisper carried by the wind. May Arvindale never forget what was earned tonight, not through conquest, but through faith. Kale's arm wrapped around her, drawing her close. Then let it be remembered in every howl and every heartbeat. As the wolf's song reached its peak, the moon shone brighter, casting its light across the kingdom, over the forests, the rivers, the towers, and the two figures standing together at its heart. And when the night grew still again, only one truth remained. The Lunar Queen and her Alpha King were not just rulers of a realm, but guardians of a legacy written in light.